On February 28, 2026, US and Israeli strikes assassinated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the man who had held absolute authority over the Islamic Republic for 35 years. Within hours, Iran's power structure did not grieve. It moved. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, Iran's ideological armed force, a designated terrorist organization in the United States and the European Union, began making phone calls, not to diplomats, not to clerics, to the members of the Assembly of Experts, the 88-seat clerical body constitutionally mandated to choose the next supreme leader. And the message wasn't a suggestion. This is the story of what those calls created, and what they mean for every country whose oil moves through a 21-mile strait. For 35 years, the Islamic Republic operated around a single gravitational point. Ali Khamenei was not just a head of state, he was the faqih, the supreme jurist, whose words superseded parliament, overruled presidents, and directed the IRGC's deployments across 4 countries. He had survived an assassination attempt in 1981 that destroyed his right hand. He had outlasted 8 presidents, 2 reform movements, and 4 rounds of Western sanctions. He had built a system so centralized around his own authority that no institution inside Iran had ever been forced to function without him. When the strikes hit his compound on February 28th, they didn't just kill a man. They detonated the load-bearing wall of a 47-year-old structure, and what emerged from the rubble was not what the architects of the strikes had planned for. The Assembly of Experts was supposed to be the answer. Iran's constitution is explicit. Upon the death or incapacitation of the supreme leader, the assembly convenes and selects his replacement through deliberation and consensus. In 1989, after Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's death, that process took days, measured, dignified, legitimate. What happened in March 2026 looked nothing like that. The assembly's building in Qom had been destroyed by strikes before the vote was completed. 5 or 6 attempts to convene in person failed entirely on security grounds. The election moved online. 8 members announced they would boycott the second session, stating publicly they were facing, in their own words, heavy pressure. Those who raised objections to the frontrunner were given limited time to speak before discussion was cut off and a vote was called. According to 5 senior Iranian sources speaking to Reuters, the IRGC had contacted assembly members directly, repeatedly, with what one reformist former official described as threats. The process that Iran's constitution designates as the sovereign act of clerical deliberation had become, by any verifiable account, a military management exercise. The name the IRGC pushed through was Mojtaba Khamenei. I am 56 years old, second son of the man just assassinated, a cleric of the Qom seminary, a former Basij commander, and, for over 2 decades, the invisible gatekeeper of his father's office. Mojtaba had never held elected office. He had never held a cabinet position. He had never delivered a televised address. What he had done methodically since 2009 was build a loyalty network inside the IRGC's 2nd and 3rd tier command structure. The layer of commanders that remained intact after the war's strikes eliminated the top generals. Alex Vatanka, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, stated it plainly. Mojtaba owes his position to the Revolutionary Guards, and as such, he is not going to be as supreme as his father was. The Atlantic Council went further, identifying Mojtaba as someone with close ties to the most ideologically extremist clerics inside the Iranian system. His first confirmed statement as supreme leader was read aloud on state television. The Guardian reported that the statement's typography and clerical language contained errors that a knowledgeable source in Tehran attributed to IRGC dictation, not authorship by the new leader himself. He has not appeared publicly since the election. What the IRGC created was not a supreme leader in the sense Khamenei's constitution envisioned. It created a title. Behind the title, something else is running Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz crisis made it visible to the entire world. On April 17th, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced that commercial shipping would be permitted through the strait for the duration of the ceasefire. The announcement lasted less than 48 hours. Hardline commentators, semi-official state media, and voices on state television immediately condemned the language of the statement. Iran's National Security Council reversed course. Iranian armed forces declared the strait closed again, citing the continuing U.S. naval blockade as justification. According to a Time magazine analysis published on April 21, 2026, the sequence was interpreted in sections of the American press as evidence of a rift between Iran's political leadership and its military hardliners. The actual picture, per Hamidreza Azizi, a visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, is more precise than that. Iran is not fractured along a civilian-military fault line. What it is navigating is a post-Khamenei transition in which the old order resists displacement, the new one is not yet consolidated, and the supreme leader functions less as an undisputed final arbiter than as a participant in a broader security-led consensus. That is not a rift, it is a restructuring, and the restructuring is accelerating. Fox News Digital reported, citing Iran International, that the IRGC has blocked President Masoud Pezeshkian's governmental appointments and erected what sources described as a security cordon isolating the supreme leader's office. Behnam Ben Taleblu, senior director of the Iran program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, said it directly. It was always a matter of when, not if, the IRGC was going to step forward even more than it has in the last 3 decades. Pezeshkian, the reformist president elected in July 2024 on promises of economic relief and diplomatic engagement, has reached, in the words of Iran International, a complete political deadlock. His appointments were blocked. His foreign minister's announcements reversed within 48 hours. His administration is functionally sidelined by commanders who answer to a supreme leader who has said nothing in public since March 9th. The Strait of Hormuz tells you the economic stakes faster than any diplomatic briefing. Before February 28th, roughly 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade and 20% of its liquefied natural gas transited this 21-mile choke point daily. By March 2, 2026, no tankers in the strait were broadcasting automatic identification system signals. By March 19th, Dubai crude oil hit a record $166 per barrel. By the second week of March, California's average gasoline price had crossed $5 per gallon, up more than 50% from pre-war levels. The International Energy Agency's 32-member states unanimously released 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, 4 days of global supply, to slow the surge. It didn't hold. The ceasefire talks in Islamabad, brokered by Pakistan, collapsed on April 12th. Trump declared a naval blockade on Iranian ports the following day. As of this week, Rubio has described the U.S. combat operation launched in February as over, and reframed U.S. objectives around what the Pentagon called Project Freedom, a defensive naval escort mission aimed at restoring commercial transit through international waters. The IRGC Navy immediately warned that any military vessel approaching the strait would be treated as a ceasefire violation. The global reaction has split along exactly the fault lines Iran's new military leadership wants. China and Russia vetoed a UN Security Council resolution on April 7th, calling for an end to Iranian attacks on shipping. China, whose oil imports from the Gulf depend on Hormuz, simultaneously called freedom of navigation a shared call of the international community. Russia's oil producers have quietly benefited from the supply disruption. The U.S. temporarily lifted sanctions on Russian petroleum exports during the crisis to stabilize Asian markets. India, Pakistan, and Iraq negotiated bilateral access for their flagged vessels through the strait. The result is a patchwork of bilateral accommodations that the IRGC is managing like a toll structure, granting access selectively, country by country, to fragment any unified international response. This is not improvised. It is strategic leverage being executed by an institution that has spent 3 decades preparing to operate at exactly this scale. What comes next splits into 3 documented scenarios, each with a different pressure point. The first, Mojtaba Khamenei consolidates authority. This requires him to emerge publicly, deliver credible leadership messaging, and begin building an independent base of clerical legitimacy that exists outside IRGC patronage. The intelligence picture, as of early May, makes this difficult. His injuries sustained in the February 28th strike remain a subject of conflicting Iranian state claims, and his prolonged absence from public view is itself a governing liability in a system built on visible religious authority. The second scenario, The IRGC completes what multiple analysts describe as an already well-advanced takeover of civilian state functions, producing a de facto military government with a clerical figurehead. The Just Security Assessment from March 16th noted that even if Mojtaba does not survive, this outcome may only entrench further, because the IRGC's institutional power does not depend on any single individual. The third scenario, regime collapse through economic pressure, is the one the Trump administration's blockade strategy is designed to force. U.S. intelligence, according to reporting cited by Just Security, currently assesses the regime is not at risk of collapse and maintains control over the Iranian population. Brent crude, as of late April, was trading at $114 per barrel. The pressure is real, the timeline is not. The clerics who built the Islamic Republic in 1979 designed it to resist exactly this kind of external assault. What they did not fully design against was internal military capture. Asghar Hijazi, one of Ali Khamenei's closest aides, reportedly warned the Assembly of Experts before the election that placing Mojtaba in power would effectively hand the country to the Revolutionary Guard and permanently sideline civilian institutions. That warning, according to Fox News Digital's reporting, increasingly appears to reflect what has already happened. Iran is not a country without a supreme leader. It is a country whose supreme leader's authority is being exercised, for now, by a coalition of military commanders who forced his election, drafted his public statements, reversed his foreign minister's ceasefire announcements, and blocked his president's appointments, all while displaying his portrait on highway billboards across Tehran. The question is not whether the IRGC controls Iran. The verified record of the last 66 days answers that. The question is whether a 56-year-old cleric, recovering from shrapnel wounds, holding a title he received under duress, can find a way to become something his own backers didn't intend to create. History offers one precedent that matters here. In 1989, a man named Ali Khamenei was elevated to supreme leader without sufficient religious credentials, without a popular base, and on the strength of a single powerful patron. It took him a decade to make that office his own. His son has no decade. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, the blockade is tightening, and the commanders who put him in power are already writing the statements that carry his name. The Islamic Republic has changed its leader. It has not changed its direction. And the only institution in Tehran that knows exactly where it is going is the one whose name appears on no ballot and answers to no electorate, the one that